Happy Friday! Hello everybody, it's Tanya Tracy with Flow Physical Therapy and Pilates in Asheville, North Carolina. And I'm back again today with another Feature Area Friday. So last week I had talked about finding pelvic neutral and had said I would move forward this week and show something that ties into that and is another one of what I consider to be some of the basic building blocks of most rehab and all Pilates. So this week, what we're going to be looking at and what I'm going to teach you is about the deep core abdominal muscle, the transverse abdominus. So the transverse abdominus, for a quick little educational value, is the muscle that sits between these two bones and it runs across your body. So the fibers sit like this. It also connects into some tough fibrous tissue that's going all the way around your back. So between the muscle fibers and that tough fibrous tissue, you have a ring that sits around your pelvis and low back. So when you tighten these muscles down and the fibers pull together, essentially it's like you're tightening up a corset or it's cinching up a brace, like a low back brace that you might use, or like the mother-to-be binders for pregnant women. So you're adding support and stability to this area to take some of the load off of those low back muscles that are trying to support your spine. So the way I want to do this today, I'll show you a couple different positions, but what I want to really emphasize is these are not huge muscles. They're not big, meaty, beefy muscles like we think about the muscles like our quads, our hamstrings, even our calves and our glute muscles. Those are all big, beefy, powerful muscles. They're meant to do more explosive activities. They're meant to handle heavy loads. They're like the bull in a china shop. They're gonna get it done with a big movement and maybe something else, but maybe not. So the transverse abdominus is like your ballerina, basically. Think about this in terms of it's more precise. It is a gentle contraction. It's not meant to do big heavy lifting, big explosive movements. It will to a certain extent, because even when we're running, if we're running hard, we are getting some activation, some movement of that in the obliques. But the contractions that I'm going to show you today, the tightening of that muscle, it shouldn't be like a grip. It shouldn't be as hard as you can squeeze that muscle. You want to think of like a light tension holding things, because this is a muscle that creates stability or support through your core so that your arms and your legs are working off a solid base. When they work off a solid base, the muscles of the arms and legs can work more efficiently. So to start out, we're going to go into a hands and knees position, which gets called sometimes the quadruped position. So when you do this position, you want to make sure your hands are right underneath your shoulders so they form a line. And same thing at your knees. So your knees should be directly below your hips. Now last week, again, we talked about that neutral spine. So what we want to think is, are we sagging here where we have a forward tilt? Have we arched ourselves up with a backwards tilt or backwards rotation? We want to find that in-between spot. And the other thing is we don't want our ears by our shoulders. So you kind of think drawing those down, your back, bringing your shoulder blades down a little bit, or your ears away from your shoulder to create some space, which is hard to see my ear here, some space between my shoulder and my ear. So in this position, we have good alignment. So the other thing is we're not sinking into our shoulders either. We want to be comfortably pressed up into our shoulders when we do this. So we're keeping a nice neutral position. So when you contract this muscle, first thing I want you to do is find that neutral spine, and then just let your belly relax. You can see with mine, when it's relaxed, it just kind of hangs there. So a cue I like to give women that seems to work well is imagine you have a belly full of kittens or puppies, whichever you prefer, and you're just letting your stomach relax and they're all hanging out there. Now it's not that you're letting your spine relax, you're still keeping that neutral position, but you're just letting your stomach go. For men, you could say, imagine you have a belly full of water, or if you love it and it's Asheville, beer. So you have a belly full of beer. So after you relax, you're going to take a nice deep breath, and on the exhale, you're going to try and draw those abdominals up. You're tightening them. So what this will feel like, cue-wise, you can think of like you're trying to hug those baby kittens or puppies, or like you kind of don't want your beer belly or water bloated belly to stick out. So you're just lightly pulling in. What it isn't is like suck in. So if you feel your rib cage drawing up, you're just sucking in your diaphragm. So your ribs shouldn't change. It's just a light pull up, and you should feel tension in between those two bones that we had our hands on last week, which were these two pelvic bones right here called the ASIS. So again, this area should feel a little bit of tension without changing the position of our back. So that's the hands and knees position. Sometimes if it's hard for you to do that position with your wrist, you can put a pillow down underneath, which I don't currently have underneath me, but you can put a pillow down or a couple pillows to get yourself propped up so you're on your elbows, or you can even take and make a fist to do the same position. It will put you up a little higher, but that's okay. We want to save our joints. There's no need in destroying them. Just do one thing. So that's doing it in hands and knees or quadruped. That position tends to be easier because we have all of our organs like our stomach and our intestines going down because gravity's pulling them down, and we're using our abdominal muscles to support them or kind of draw them up. So that tends to be a really good position for most people to find that transverse abdominus contraction. So the next position you can do, which is also one of the easier positions, is laying on your side. Now when you're laying on your side, I'm going to exaggerate. You can see how right now I have this big divot right here. We want to straighten out our spine. So when I do that, you see again a little space opening up here. With your hips, you want to think about your hips straight up and down. So you could drop a rod between them and it would go through both hip bones. You don't want to be forward or backward. You want to be straight up and down. So keeping that little space there. You can also think of, instead of just picking up a space here, you can think lengthening this hip down or lengthening your pelvis down. So when you do this, you're going to hold this position. Same idea, you're going to inhale and let your belly relax. And on the exhale, you're drawing that abdominal muscle tighter. So you can feel like this bone and this bone, the two bones, are squeezing towards each other or drawing in. You can imagine that you're squeezing your bladder. That's another cue for this one. And when you do this properly, you can take your fingertips on that same bone, the ASIS that we felt last week, and you can bring your fingertips in to the crease of the first knuckle so that your fingertips are on those abdominal muscles. When you relax, you don't feel a lot. But when you contract, you should feel a little bit of a muscle bulge underneath your fingers. And again, it's not a clenching. It's just a light tension that we're putting between here. And depending on the exercise intensity, sometimes a moderate tension. So when we do this, the other thing you might see is your belly button might draw in just a little bit. Again, if it's sucking in, which you'll probably see better when I lay down, it means you're just drawing up your diaphragm, which is a very different thing, and it won't help your core out. So the last thing I'm going to show everyone is how to find this in laying down. So again, we don't want to be all the way back. We don't want to be all the way arched forward. We want to find that in-between spot for our neutral spine. So I'm going to keep a hand here so it's out of the way. But what I want you to do, again, that same feeling where you're either taking these two bones and imagining that you're drawing them towards each other, or feel like you're trying to lightly hug or squeeze your bladder. And you can feel on those hip bones, or sorry, pelvis bones. I say hip because most people think of it as their hip. So you go to your pelvic bone, fingertips in on the lower abdominals. You inhale, let your belly go, and exhale, draw it in. I'm going to put a fingertip on my belly button, and hopefully this gives you a little cue. So here's breathing in. Here it is on the exhale. So you can see it draws in, but it's not doing that, where you can see my rib cage getting more prominent and my belly really dropping. That's when I'm using my diaphragm. So you can practice these things. And when you do these contractions, as I've said in the past, the contractions are moderate. They're not all in. You hold them for a couple seconds, you let them go. And the easiest way to do it is relax the muscles on the inhale, let the belly relax. And on the exhale is when you contract the muscle. This is typically the way a lot of these muscles like to work, especially in the pelvic floor. And this muscle does tie in two muscles of the pelvic floor. So this is very helpful to have good control of this and have some good stability of it and good endurance. So you do them throughout the day. You can do them in sitting as well. It's not as visually easy to see. And in sitting, the same cues go. You can feel like you're drawing your bones towards each other. You can feel like you're lightly trying to pull your belly button in. You can think of that squeezing your bladder. The easier one that I've talked about in the past is you just imagine you're sitting up tall. And typically when you try to sit tall, you feel them contracting just a little bit anyway. So there's a couple different ways to get this done. And these are just a few. So I hope this helps you. And if you're curious, check out any of the other videos I had. I'm going to keep posting videos similar to these, especially with some Pilates influence into them, just to kind of see how it can be used along with traditional physical therapy exercises and just for everyday use. If you like this, please like it, share it, follow me. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, and I'm currently working on getting a YouTube channel up so that it's not just posted here on Facebook and on Instagram. And check out my website. It's flowptandpilates.com. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I should be seeing you next Friday. Thank you.